Great. And we are live. Well, welcome to Normative's webinar on Scope 3 emissions, how to successfully engage your value chain, jointly organized with EcoVadis. Well, we welcome everybody. It'd be great to hear where you're joining from. So on our side, the panel is spread across Sweden, the UK, and France. It's the joys of technology that allows us to do that. So please drop into the chat where you're joining from. I can see that some of you are already chatting. That's great. Well, Brazil, wow, much further away than I expected. Well, before we kick off, a bit of housekeeping. So this webinar will last 45 minutes as usual. It will be recorded and the recording will be available as soon as this webinar is over. And you have the questions tabs, very important for any questions you may have. It's on the bottom right corner of your screen. And during our conversation, please don't hesitate to type in your question and we'll answer it towards the end of the webinar. And after the end of the webinar, you'll be brought to a 3-question survey, very short. Please answer it to help us improve and deliver webinars on topics of your interest, because this is our main aim. So on to today's agenda. As you can see, we have a lot to go through. So after presenting Normative and EcoVadis, Mary from EcoVadis will guide us through the benefits and reasons for more granular data. Mary is a senior sustainability solution consultant at EcoVadis and supports clients in their supply chain engagement journey through the EcoVadis solution. Then I will be delighted to welcome Jona, our product manager at Normative, who will, along with Mary, present our new partnership between Normative and EcoVadis. And then finally, Eamon, our Normative's climate strategy advisor, who will present real-life examples and best practices to anchor us back into the real world, because let's not forget that it's not just about dreaming and dreaming about the best, which is our job, but it is also to make this happen concretely. And then, of course, at the end of this session, we will have a Q&A session. So please continue to send through your questions in the questions tab at the bottom right corner of your screen, and we will answer those towards the end. So now our first short presentation by Jona about Normative.
Thank you, Victoria. Hello, everyone. I'm really excited to be here. My name is Jonna Lindell. I work as a product manager here at Normative. I work specifically with functionality around Scope 3 and value chain engagement. So this is a topic that is really close to my heart, and I'm super excited to have Marie here from EcoVadis to talk more about this, and then also some best tips and tricks from Eamon after that. But if you are not familiar with Normative, I will let you know that we are a carbon accounting platform and a provider of services in carbon accounting. We transform the E and ESG into a strategic advantage for your business, because real climate change is an unpredictable climate. It's not only a tick in the box and a compliance thing anymore. It's a real business risk. And if you work with real carbon data in a strategic way, you can actually turn this into a way to grow faster, acquire customers faster than your competitors, and also gain access to more capital while still mitigating risks and understanding both risks and opportunities in your value chain. So that's what we do. And there are a lot of companies popping up in this space. We're all doing carbon accounting this right now. And Normative is one of the OG players in this space. We've been around for more than 12 years, and we are more than 160 climate professionals here to help you. We do set apart from the rest in mainly 2 ways. Maybe our really strong focus on Scope 3 and also our scientific integrity that is at the heart of everything we do. We are contributing to different standards and leading policymakers. We are contributing to UN Race to Zero, for example, and we're part of the Greenhouse Gas Protocol Scope 3 Technical Working Group. And we work with a variety of customers across a variety of different industries. And I think one thing they all have in common is that Scope 3 is a huge challenge, and really engaging with your value chain and creating a real chain and have a real change and a real impact is really hard. So the partnership with EcoVadis, I think, is something I'm very excited about for this very reason, since EcoVadis has a long experience with working with specifically value chains, and I am super happy to also talk to Eamon a bit at the end about some real life best tips and tricks. But with that, I'll hand it over to Marie. What do EcoVadis do?
Thank you, Jonna. Hello, everyone. So my name is Marie Thorne. I work as a senior sustainability consultant, and more specifically, actually, on the Carbon Action Manager, which is our solution that helps both on supply engagement on carbon, but also on data collection with the Carbon Data Network. But before I go into this, I just want to do a quick presentation of EcoVadis for those that don't know us yet. So let's dive into this. So as you can see, we work, we have 18 years of experience, and we have worked mostly with sustainable procurement. We're a global SaaS platform powered by AI, and we have created a global standard to compare performance between all suppliers within a uniformed platform. So you can see on the left here that we work with many customers from different industries, and you can see that we have, I would say, about 1,500 sustainable procurement programs that are now in place. I think that we have rated 150,000 companies by now, and across more than 250 industries and 185 countries. Another interesting element is that we work with sector initiatives. So we have about 12 different initiatives across sectors that also here helps to align industry and support with the collaboration between peers. And another element, and I think that this is where also very excited about the partnership with Normative, is that we have 150 different ecosystem partners also in place that also helps to streamline and make data exchange much more easy. So in terms of the different solutions that we have, EcoVadis has a bunch, as you can see here, that helps as well with compliance, with risk management, but also to understand more what supplier performance. So here you can see that we have solutions that focus more on risk mapping. So with IQ+, we have Vital Solution that works with supplier risk profiling, and the sustainability ratings, which is the initial product that we have always worked with. What is also interesting is that we have always program guidance, reporting, business intelligence, and the EcoVadis Academy, which are all across solutions, and the one that is of interest today, which is the Carbon Action Manager that helps to support suppliers with a decarbonization program. So finally, on the specific solution, so Carbon Action Manager, as I mentioned, it is really the purpose of this solution to help with carbon supply engagement, but also to build a strong carbon data network. And we want this to be really a process that works as a collaborative approach between suppliers and buyers. So here we have different elements that support suppliers on their journey, such as e-learning, corrective action plans. We also have a carbon estimator in place to support with estimation and data collection. And on the other side, for buyers, they have access to the carbon data network. So having more insights into both quantitative and qualitative data with data reliability, and ideally also primary data that they can gather here and they can later use also for carbon accounting purposes. All right, so that was in a few words what EcoVadis does. And maybe to build on this, now let's spend a bit of time on the benefits and the reasons for more granular data, right? Because where we come from, we basically have many companies that find it a bit easier to work with scope 1 and 2 emissions, right? These are direct emissions where it's quite simple for them to get access. Where it really becomes tricky and more complicated is when it comes to the scope 3 emissions, right? Because scope 3 emissions are indirect emissions. They are more complex as well, and they require also more work and collaboration with suppliers. So why is scope 3 important? One of the reasons why it's so critical is, and John, you mentioned it before, is the business imperative, right? We see that climate transition is not an option now. We have a significant portion of revenue that is expected to be tied to it by 2030. And the companies that are proactively addressing decarbonization are the ones that are positioning themselves for future success and also for resilience. Pursuing Scope 3 reduction also leads to more resilient value chains. I really think that this resilience needs to be highlighted as an important critical aspect. And this is because we can see that sometimes, in supply chains, when you don't know what happens in your supply chain, you might have more risks that are related to it. So this can be quite costly. And of course, the more you understand what happens in your supply chain, the more resilient you can be. Another aspect is the competitive advantage, because proactively tackling these Scope 3 emissions can help you for your company's appeal to customers, but not only to customers, actually also for the people that work within your own company, so your employees, for investors, and for all of your partner network. And finally, we also tackled about it. We shouldn't just stay there, but also regulatory compliance is also an important element of addressing Scope 3 emissions. We see here in the world in which we are that this compliance and regulatory aspect is getting stronger. And so, of course, addressing Scope 3 emissions can help you also with this aspect. And so this slide here, you have the illustration of basically two different paths. The first one is really the proactive approach that we mentioned before on tackling Scope 3 emissions, which is basically taking you from first understanding your carbon risks to the prioritization of supplier with the focus on collaboration, the important aspect of the collection of primary data, but also building the capacities of suppliers that really goes hand in hand, right? There's not one without the other, to then measure progress and finally go to an economy that is more decarbonized. The alternative, which is inaction, exposes your supply chain to significant carbon risks and can also lead to a failure to adapt. But there are many challenges, of course, that comes with Scope 3. And here, let me highlight a few of them. So we mentioned before that to get Scope 3, there is a need to collaborate with supplier. And this is the first challenge that I want to highlight today, is really the difficulty with the collection of supply-specific data. Because getting accurate emission data from a very diverse and global supply base can be quite complicated. You can have different reasons for that. You can have suppliers that lack the resources and the expertise to calculate and to report their carbon footprint. But also you can get suppliers that are quite frustrated because they get repeatedly asked for the same type of data from different trading partners, which can be another challenge. The second challenge I want to highlight is the fact that sometimes you have limited supply visibility and collaboration on carbon. So here it's really by not understanding what happens in terms of carbon maturity within your supply chain, this can make it complicated to engage effectively and to collaborate, right? Because you don't want to have the same approach with suppliers that have a very low maturity, for example, where you want to start with, building knowledge, where you want to start with Scope 1, Scope 2, with renewable energies, and a supplier that is a company that is very advanced, where, they will go at the product level already. They have decarbonization targets that are validated by science. And you want to have this visibility because depending on it, you can take action differently. And the third challenge is the tracking part. And this is complicated again, because you can't manage what you can't measure, right? So if you don't understand how to track, there is no way in which you can later take action and understand also supplies progression over time. And so what you see on the right is really the fact that, and this is long-term, what is ideal is to go from what many companies are doing at the moment, which is working on spend-based approach. And this is really fine to start to work with the spend-based approach, but actually long-term, you want to have more supply-specific data because this is what increases the accuracy and also the potential for real impact. And now that we have identified all of the different challenges, I'm passing on again to Jonna because we, both Normative and EcoVadis, want to help you on this journey.
And I think what this partnership really brings to the table is more save time and resources for you. and an optimal solution coming from two platforms that are coming together. So if we talk about the use case where, and this is a tale I hear very often, and I'm sure, Marie, you do too. Me and Eamon have heard this a lot. Our customers want to replace average data with supplier and product-specific data into Scope 3 calculations. You want to do so because all of the reasons Marie mentioned, it's that you want granular reporting, you want a precise baseline, progress tracking, but also fully understanding your reduction opportunities and also the risks. And you want to do so without doing all the extra work from doing supplier engagement twice or over-engaging your suppliers. So what this partnership brings is really all the accuracy of enhancing your Scope 3 calculations and the automation of using data gathering in one place and doing carbon accounting in another. And then just to improve and further enhance the collaboration you have in place with your suppliers. I think the frustration that Marie mentioned and the reporting fatigue is something that you've probably heard from your suppliers, and you are most likely a supplier to someone, and so you felt it as well. And I think sometimes when we meet customers that haven't started engaging their supply chain, they still talk about the idea of having one platform that can do it all, one solution that can help you do anything. And I don't think that is fully realistic. And that's why I think partnerships between solutions and integrations between solutions is going to become more and more important. And what we bring with this partnership is a way for our customers to use EcoVadis to gather primary data from suppliers, corporate carbon footprint, but also product level data, feed this enriched carbon data into your carbon counting solution, normative in this case, and then use it to refine your footprint, do your reporting, understand your supply chain, and then use that information for when you engage your suppliers next and continue working with them. Which brings us also to some smart tips and tricks when it comes to actually doing this work. Because that's the first step in all of this, right? Getting started on engaging your value chain. Some of you might have done value chain engagements before, but I think these tips are valuable even if you're getting started from the first time or if you're renewing an engagement with your suppliers that you have had in the past. So I'll hand it over to Eamon, who works as a climate strategist here at Normative.
Thanks very much, Fiona. My name's Eamon. I'm a climate strategy advisor at Normative. And I work with customers who use the Normative carbon accounting software, but also get consultative support from myself through their full climate journey. And I'll share some tips and tricks from my experience with engaging with suppliers, both in terms of getting started, but also what to do once you receive the data. So the first tip that I would give is on clearly articulating why. So by this I mean when you first reach out to your suppliers, you may be asking them something that could be new or challenging for them to collect. You don't actually know before engaging how their level of maturity. It can be valuable to set the stage by clearly articulating why you need this information. So perhaps avoiding more generic data requests, but consider a narrative that connects directly to your broader sustainability goals. Explaining how this initiative is not just nice to have, but has some sort of strategic relevance or importance to your business that brings extra weight to that. Examples I've seen from my clients would be to share information like we're committed to reducing our organizational footprint by X% by X year, and a significant portion of our Scope 3 emissions come from our supply chain. To achieve this goal, we need to understand the emissions associated with the goods and services that we purchase from you. That's not exactly word for word, but something along these lines, or something that anchors a little bit more in what's in your own organizational ambitions, and that connects the dots between why this is important to the suppliers. It can also benefit to frame this as an opportunity for collaboration with a shared objective. I would say anecdotally, I can comment that some suppliers have used this as an opportunity to showcase some lower carbon products that they offer that the reporting company wasn't previously aware of. And this only came about because they better understood the reasoning for the data request and the strategic importance. I think the other tip would be start with your key suppliers. So time and resources are always very limited. So it's essential to prioritize your efforts. So you perhaps have a portion of your spending that's concentrated with a relatively small group of key suppliers, those who maybe provide key materials or critical components or services that are essential to your operations. If you've already conducted a spend-based carbon assessment, you can see who your high impact partners are from that initial assessment. And those would be who I would recommend for your initial focus. Engaging with these suppliers will yield the most significant results in terms of data coverage and potential for emission reductions. But it also allows you to test and refine your engagement approach with a smaller, more manageable group before you're maybe scaling it to your wider value chain. And you can learn what works, what doesn't, and also identify any challenges or roadblocks pretty early on. Another tip would be to consider what your qualifying criteria will be. So that's something I'll dive into a little bit, but by this I mean what boxes need to be ticked for you to incorporate this supplier data into your own emission inventory. So when you start receiving data from your suppliers, you'll quickly realize that data quality can come in different shapes and sizes. So some suppliers may provide more detailed and complete information. Others may provide maybe more fragmented or less transparent information. And really, to ensure the integrity of your own carbon inventory and your own reporting, it's important to establish clear qualifying criteria for the data that you will use. So you need to be able to stand behind the numbers effectively that you report. To put this in context, you may decide, okay, we'll only work with supplier data that's calculated in alignment with the greenhouse gas protocol. Maybe you decide we'll prioritize making use of the supplier data that's scope 1 and 2 data, because we believe that to be the most accurate and most reliable, and we'll incorporate their scope 3 data later on as the calculations evolve. Or maybe you decide we'll only use supplier data where the calculation methodology is transparently and publicly reported, so we can go and cross-reference it and adding additional layer of trust. Or similarly, maybe you'll only use supplier data that's been third-party verified by an auditing firm. Or maybe you'll, due to the nature of the supplier, you feel that maybe product-level data is maybe more suitable than maybe using supplier intensity data. And these criteria are typically yours to define and should reflect your organization's real specific needs and priorities. This is something that I typically help with customers with on a regular basis, but it must be noted that if you have a very overly rigorous quality criteria, that may limit the amount of supplier data that you can actually use. But it is important to at least consider these facts, I think, before you introduce them into your inventory. Another tip is on how to deal with low maturity suppliers. So I think I need to click the next slide, sorry. So with low maturity suppliers, one challenge you may face in supplier engagement is dealing with suppliers who either haven't measured their emissions or have a very low level of carbon accounting maturity. And it's easy to see this as maybe a setback or a roadblock to progress. However, this in itself is valuable information. It tells you something important about the supplier's current position on their sustainability journey. And this can also be viewed as an opportunity to share learnings. One approach here is to recognize that some suppliers, particularly smaller ones, may lack expertise, tools, or resources to effectively measure and report their emissions. They may be overwhelmed by the complexity of carbon accounting, or they may not see it as a priority. And this is where you can play a role by directing them to guidance and support, pointing them to free resources or helpful platforms like Normative that can simplify the process and make it more accessible. And then another tip is how procurement policy can drive action. So some customers have used procurement decisions to incentivize suppliers to take action on their carbon emissions. So consider incorporating supplier climate disclosure into your evaluation criteria. So this means giving preference to suppliers who are actively measuring and reducing their emissions and who are transparent about their environmental performance. And this can send a clear signal to your supplier base that sustainability is a priority for your organization and incentivizes those suppliers to take action, which then leads to better supplier data being available to you in upcoming cycles. However, it's important to acknowledge that the effectiveness of this approach often depends on the level of leverage you have over your suppliers. So if you're a large buyer with significant purchasing power, this can be a very effective tool. If you're a smaller buyer, this may be less feasible. And then the other tip would be regular follow-up. So supplier engagement is an ongoing process, not a one-time event. So plan to review supplier performance and data quality at least annually. So it can be helpful to track the following. So things like the supplier's emissions in absolute terms. So are they increasing their emissions or decreasing their emissions? Is their emission intensity increasing or decreasing per unit of output or per revenue? But also then data coverage. So are some of these suppliers expanding the scope of their reporting? So an example would be, will I soon be able to leverage their scope 3 data in future cycles? And then another thing would be target setting. So have any of these suppliers set targets? Are those targets aligned with the Science Based Targets Initiative or validated and things like that? As well as plans or existing product carbon footprints that may be measured for certain products that they supply you with. So generally, the goal of this sort of continuous follow-up is to see continuous improvement, both in terms of data quality from suppliers, but also emission reductions from your suppliers over time, and just making sure to review this process as time goes on. And then I guess the last but not least one would be keeping a record of data submissions from suppliers. So if you're working with EcoVadis or normative, this data is naturally stored. If you're taking other approaches to supplier engagement, I guess the key thing is keeping a record of what has been submitted and where it came from. So the importance of an audit trail. So demonstrating your commitment to transparency in your endeavor to get supplier level data. But in a way that an auditor, who is reviewing your emissions calculation can follow that trail and have confidence in where the calculations have come from and how they've been calculated. So I think those would be the main tips and tricks that I was prepared to share today. But yeah, thank you very much for listening. Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you, Eamon. Thank you, Jona and Mary, for this great insight. I can see that the questions have been coming in. It's always great when you have questions. It takes the conversation further. So we'll start by a question for you, Eamon, straight away to keep this ball rolling. The question is, what are the supplier data that need to be collected in calculating Scope 3 for workspaces and residential properties? And
yeah, so I guess this question, it would really depend on where that fits within your own inventory. So I guess if it's within your Scope 3 purchase goods and services, then you're effectively you're accounting for the embodied emissions from working with that supplier. So you might be looking for more building related assessments that have been done. Or if it's more of a service, perhaps it would be more their supplier intensity emissions, where you're getting their pre-calculated inventory data on Scope 1 to upstream Scope 3 and maybe revenue or outputs and things like that. I think that would answer the question. So what are the supplier data that we need to collect in Scope 3? Workspaces and residential properties. It would really depend as well, where that sits within the greenhouse gas inventory. If it's in a different category, it may be a different methodology, but
Thank you. We'll turn towards Mary. There's been a question regarding data quality. How does EcoVadis support with data quality, which I think is very important?
Thank you, Victoria. Yes, and some question on data quality. So what we are starting to do by this year is that we have created, so the issue basically is that, of course, when suppliers are sharing data, so quantitative data, we want to understand the type of quality that this data has, right? So you can have different levels. And we are introducing reliability levels on a scale that goes from 1 to 4, 4 being the highest, which means that it would be data that is third-party verified. For this type of data, we will take the information as part of the information that are shared by suppliers within the EcoVadis questionnaire that are verified by the analysts, and this is based on supporting documentation. And then for the 3 other levels, which go from low to medium and then high, what happens there is that we built a methodology that is based on 1, the supporting documentations that are shared by the suppliers within the EcoVadis assessment. Then 2, we're checking data quality criteria. So that is, for example, if there is a third-party verification or if there's alignment with the GAG protocol. And then the 3rd step is outlier detection. So here we will identify values that are really outside of the industry benchmarks. And this gives this scale, which where the recommendation would be to use the data that have a high quality, so either high or third-party verified, and to use this data for carbon accounting purposes.
Thank you, Mary. To not make Yona jealous, little question for you. This question is, what did Normative have before a carbon action manager? Surely you have been using a wide range of tools.
Yes, so Normative offers, besides the EcoVadis partnership, we actually offer our own Engage module with service as well. Since Normative works specifically with E in ESG, some of our clients are fully happy to use our own engagement tool, but in the case that you are already asking your suppliers a lot of ESG questions, it could be more suitable for you to leverage the fact that you're using EcoVadis already and not use the Normative supplier survey that is very specific for environment, but very tailored towards climate and carbon. We also offer ways for our customers to bring in supplier data that they have manually collected somewhere, but to get the automated and less work, less hassle, we recommend using an integration to get supplier data in at scale, since it will save quite a bit of time.
Well, another question about time, which I think is also always the problem. Eamon, this question is for you. Any tips on how to effectively communicate with suppliers to get their data? I wonder if calls might be better than emails. Do you have any experience with that reapps the most engagement?
Yeah, that's. I do think that's a valid point. I think what we've found is that an existing relationship with the supplier often can lead to better returns on responses. So I think initially with Normative, typically the person who has an existing relationship with the supplier can send like an embedded link rather than maybe an automated survey, because they don't know who Normative is and don't have an existing relationship. But I think having a dialogue, if you have that ability to speak to the person who's working with the supplier, is a great approach. I think we do workshops with suppliers occasionally where it's providing a bit of an education piece to the suppliers, understanding why this is relevant to the organization that's collecting the data, as well as walking them through the types of data that's being requested. So I think that often leads to much higher response rates as well. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you so much. Another question for you, Eamon. I think that your tips have inspired a lot of our audience. Any tips presented on the slides? You know, this final slide where you have all your tips. I'll just go back to it. There you go. Mm-hmm. Are any of these tips managed by the Normative EcoVadis partnership?
Yeah, so I think quite a few of them would be, in the sense that we would have recommendations on how to initially reach out to your suppliers. So we have a number of templates and ways in which you can lead to higher levels of engagement. In terms of your key suppliers, that would be the data flow that's coming from Normative. So if you've already done a spend assessment, we will be able to highlight maybe the top 10, 20, 30 suppliers that you may wish to engage with from an impact perspective. The qualifying criteria, that's typically something that as a climate strategy advisor support with. And yeah, it's quite clear in the platform when you have low maturity suppliers and maybe adopting a different approach for some of those. And then again, yeah, the audit trail side of things, I guess the data exists within EcoVadis and/or normative, and an auditor who wishes to understand further where the data has come from or how effectively the emission factor has been calculated would be visible to any auditor that had that access. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, Eamon, we'll take a little pause for you. We have a question for Mary. Mary, what type of data is currently available and what will be available via the integration?
Thank you. So currently the data that is available is basically the data that is available as part of the EcoVadis API. So this is really the carbon scorecards. Long term, of course, we plan to expand this to make it even more easy to get the data. So this is currently work in progress. So we're building a new API this year. So that hopefully we can expand the type of information that will be available also within the normative platform.
It also, I think, depends a bit on what the customer would like to achieve. Since you could be wanting to do supplier-specific calculations, and then it's a matter of scope 1, 2, and 3 data from your suppliers together with the intensities. But if you wanted to do something we call a spend-based hybrid, which is actually then a hybrid between using supplier-specific and average, you could be using only scope 1 and 2 from your suppliers. And then we would substitute the scope 3 part with an average emission factor. That's a good middle way for some of our clients that have not so mature suppliers. You could also use your targets to do supplier forecasts and model reduction scenarios. So there's a lot of data available, but it also depends on a bit what you would want to achieve, actually,
yes, of course,
moving your data in between the platforms.
Yes, sounds very promising. Eamon, another question for you. You have been the star of this webinar. You mentioned averages don't drive business. Do you have some examples of what has been done to move away from averages?
Yeah, so I think perhaps it's maybe averages don't drive maybe reductions. Perhaps I guess the common example I guess is maybe when it comes to maybe using the spend-based method for calculating scope 3. You're typically looking at an industry average, so this amount of emissions per euro spent in a generic industry or in a specific country might also be the variable that's in play there. But when it comes to you plotting that year on year, as if your spend naturally just increases, then your emissions naturally increase with that correlation. But it's not necessarily taking on board any of the initiatives that supplier themselves are directly taking on. So whether they are much more energy efficient than some of their peers, whether they've taken on a lot of emission reduction initiatives, so their actual emissions per unit of revenue that you provide them with is actually much lower. So I guess the key thing there is if you're moving away from we have many examples where we have customers who have previously calculated using those industry average factors and then have moved over then to the supplier data, and then effectively each year that supplier is perhaps reducing their emission intensity year on year, that starts to be embedded within your own calculation. So all of a sudden your procurement decisions and who you choose to partner with, you're effectively your partners in reduction, rather than there being a bit of a disconnect there between what you spend and the factor that's being applied.
Well, yes, it kind of ties to another question we had coming in. We've been talking about engaging your supply chain, engaging external colleagues, but how do you, maybe Eamon, this is for you, how do you get your own organization on board in engaging the supply chain?
So I think that would be, in terms of trying to increase response rates and having your own buy-in. I think based on observations and successful implementations that I've observed, I have seen companies address this through sort of internal ownership and delegation. So, and also integrating this into maybe performance targets and things like that. So instead of assigning supplier data collection to a single individual, delegate this responsibility maybe to category managers within the organization. Yeah, and then that sort of divide and conquer approach leverages existing supplier relationships and distributes the workload, as well as perhaps when you integrate it into targets and things like that as well. Some clients have defined the collection of supplier carbon and supplier data to be in their quarterly or yearly targets, and yeah, making that sort of the responsibility within the organization, different individuals within the organization, and then having incentives to sort of drive that. So it would typically be the approach that I see working.
Great. Well, thank you, Eamon. Thank you so much. There you go. Thank you to all our speakers, and thank you all for attending your questions. We've had the webinar. We've had great questions. Some of them have been answered live. Some of them have been answered written by Mary and Yona. I think we got all the questions, but please consider filling out a survey as soon as you leave this webinar. And you have amazing links here on this final page for any more information about normative and EcoVadis. Thank you again, and see you until next time.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you,
Bye for
Victoria.
now.
Bye.